Hi there, it's Joan, and today from Joan's Kitchen I'm going to be talking about mole. Mole is one of the more traditional Mexican sauces. The word mole, we believe, comes from a word to mix or a mixture, and there's a lot of different ingredients in mole. I have made mole from scratch before. It's a very laborious process, and it's easier for us nowadays because we have things like blenders and food processors. Back in the day when this was first done, the traditional Mexican kitchen, they would probably be using either a molcajete, which is kind of like our modern day mortar and pestle, but it's made out of like a volcanic rock. It's usually about this big and stands on three legs and has a thing to mash it with. Or perhaps a molinillo, which is kind of like another thing made out of the same stone, like a flat tablet that's on an angle, and it would have another stone piece that resembled more like a rolling pin on which you would push the food down to grind it. As I am starting today, I just want to point out, if anybody has any questions while I'm going along, please ask and I will try to answer them. And if you're watching this on the replay, please go ahead and pop your question into the comment box and I will do my very best to answer it. I wanted to start out by reading my mother's recipe for mole so you can get an idea of the kinds of ingredients and the complexity of this particular dish. So she started out with chicken stock, some blanched almonds, garlic, pumpkin seeds, and pumpkin seeds are not in the shell. They're the ones that are out of the shell already. They're green. You can also see them called pepitas now. Raisins, the chile anchos, which are the dried broad red chiles, which we have used before in some of the cooking classes. They're actually the dried version of the poblano pepper. It would have peanuts or peanut butter, a small stick of canela. Canela is a cinnamon stick. The cinnamon sticks that we use in Mexico are not the tightly wound, thick, barky ones like from Asia, but it's more like a soft bark that's loose. It actually, on a side note, makes a lovely tea if you just take some of the Mexican cinnamon sticks and boil them or steep them in a little water. It's just a delicious tea. It's very good for calming down your stomach. This recipe also had breadcrumbs and tortillas, which were thickeners for the sauce, sesame seeds, a dash of anise, 3 cloves, the whole cloves, like, another spice, 2 ounces of Mexican chocolate, and olive oil, and then she had optional for a cup of white wine. So that kind of gives you an idea of the ingredients that go into this recipe. We believe, or the legend has it, that mole was created by a group of nuns in Puebla, and they were expecting a visit from, I guess, the bishop, and they were very poor and they didn't have a lot in their house. So they prayed and then made a mixture of what they had on hand, which was chiles and some nuts and some seeds and some spices and some leftover bread. They had an old turkey that they killed, and they stewed the turkey and put the sauce on top of this turkey, and the bishop loved it. So that's one of the stories for the origin of mole. You may be familiar with the term mole poblano. Poblano refers to being from Puebla, which is the state where most of the mole is from. People in the state of Oaxaca also claim originating mole. Moles are really found all over Mexico, and there's, as you can imagine from the ingredient list, there's all kinds of varieties of ingredients that may be put into a mole. In some cases they may have tomatoes, in other cases they may put tomatillos. Tomatillos are things that look like tiny green tomatoes with a papery skin on them, and they actually have almost like a citrusy flavor to them. They typically have some kind of a fruit. It could be a raisin, it could be apricot, it could be cherries. It depends on what's available where they're making it. It's always going to have some kind of pepper, and then typically it has some kind of nuts. The nuts might be almonds, they might be peanuts. Having pumpkin seeds is pretty common because pumpkin was one of the indigenous plants in Mexico. And what I wanted to talk about today was that we don't have to go to all the labor of putting together a mole from scratch. If you do, it's a lovely dish. But I mentioned in my header that this can really be almost like a convenience food, and I'm going to tell you why. In most American grocery stores now, you've probably seen a product like this or like this, and these are both mole sauces. So this one that I have here, this is actually fully constituted and prepared. All that you have to do is reheat it. This one here is a little bit different. This is a mole paste, and this is what we're going to be working with. So this is thick and concentrated. We're going to need to thin this out with a little bit of chicken stock, which I have here, and then I season it up with a little bit of Mexican chocolate and a little peanut butter. I also wanted to talk about this product. We live in Southern California, so we're very close to the Mexican border, and we have several Mexican markets here, but this is a product that you might find in a Mexican market all around the U.S. If you go into a food market in Puebla or Oaxaca, there are going to be tables that are going to be filled up with these huge towers. They look like cones, and it's mole paste, and there's all different varieties, there's all different colors, all different flavorings, and they sell it by the kilo. Kilo's about 2 pounds. And so I bought this at our little Mexican market the other day, and this is from Oaxaca. It's in a little plastic bag, but it's just like a little cut out from one of those big blocks of mole. It probably weighs close to 1 pound. It's very, very concentrated. I don't even know what I would compare it to in consistency, maybe like a very thick pudding. But in theory, this would be diluted with some chicken stock, and then you can season it up as you like. But for today, I'm going to use the Doña Maria brand, which is going to be more generally available here in the U.S. As I mentioned, I'm going to be thinning it out with some chicken stock. I'm going to add a little bit of peanut butter to flavor it. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of Mexican chocolate. Now I want to talk about the Mexican chocolate for a minute. This is also generally available in supermarkets here in the U.S. It typically comes in this box. It's like a 6-sided box. The 2 brands that you're going to see most frequently are Abuela, which means grandmother, or Ibarra, which is this one with the red and yellow box. And when you open up the box, you have these tablets that are individually wrapped, and this is the Mexican chocolate. Chocolate was indigenous to Mexico, Central America, South America, so this was a new product that the Europeans brought back to Europe after they came and explored Mexico. This particular Mexican chocolate has sugar added. It's going to be coarse sugar. You can actually see the grains of sugar in the chocolate, and some ground nuts and some ground cinnamon. It has a lovely flavor, and it's one of my favorite things to make a drink called chocolate, which is basically these tablets of chocolate melted into hot milk. You should really try it sometime. Americans are getting to be more familiar with Mexican chocolate. You'll find ice cream that's made out of Mexican chocolate flavor and all kinds of other things, but it's really a good thing, and it's a nice thing to season this with. I already have one of these unwrapped. So the Mexican chocolate, the tablets are divided into either 6 or 8 little triangles, and I hacked this up with a knife because I don't need to use the whole tablet. I'm just going to use a little piece of the chocolate in my sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my pot here. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is that typically in Mexican kitchens, the mole would be cooked in a clay pot like this. This is called a cazuela, C-A-Z-U-E-L-A. But you would have to stir it constantly to make sure that the mixture didn't scorch. I'm actually going to be using an enamel cast iron pot today, but I just wanted to show you what this looks like. At one time, these were not recommended for cooking here in the U.S. because the glaze that they were using on these had lead in it, and the lead could actually leach out to the food. Nowadays, if you buy one of these pots new, it's probably even going to have a sticker on it that says that it's lead-free or lead-safe. So typically these are now perfectly safe to cook in, and they can go right on top of the stove. So I'm going to set that aside. And I'm going to scoop my mole out into the pot. This mole has a lot of oil already in the pan. I think or in the jar, looking at the ingredients, I think they said it was safflower oil. And I'm going to have to kind of like pull it out with a knife, and you can see it's a very thick paste. So that's why we're going to need to dilute it. And the consistency of the mole sauce is going to be like a very thick sauce, almost maybe like a mayonnaise-y consistency, maybe a little bit more liquidy than that. So as soon as I can get this out of here, I'm going to start adding some chicken broth to dilute it and get it to the consistency that I want. Mole sauce is very versatile. The traditional way was to serve it over some kind of fowl, like turkey or chicken that's cooked, and it's delicious that way. The kind of bland poultry is a perfect foil for this very tasty sauce. It's also frequently used here in the States as a sauce over enchiladas. It's just such a tasty sauce, you could use it in all different manner of ways. And I think kind of my ultimate shortcut is when I make tamales. If I'm pressed for time, I'll get rotisserie chicken and make a mole sauce like this, reconstitute it, and I will moisten the shredded chicken with this sauce, and that's the filling that I use for the tamales. The typical meat that I use for the tamales, which is called picadillo, the sauce takes much longer to prepare. It's delicious, but in a pinch, if you're in a hurry, this is a perfectly acceptable substitute. So I've gotten all this mole paste out of my jar. And I'm going to lift this up. I hope you can see this. It's going to be a little bit hard, but it just looks like this dried up stuff, this brown stuff in my bowl here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my chicken stock and add some of that. And I don't have an exact measurement for this. I'm adding it until I can get it to the consistency that I want it to be. So I'm probably starting out adding maybe 3/4 of a cup. And I'm just going to whisk that around. I'm going to turn my heat down a little bit because it's pretty hot already. So the biggest challenge right now is just to get this to kind of soften up and meld into the chicken stock that I've added. So it's starting to soften up a little bit already. Let me hold this up for you. But I'm definitely going to need to add more chicken stock to get it to the consistency that I want. While I was doing research for this, I learned that the customs people here in the U.S. have talked about bringing fresh mole home, or the mole paste, back from the markets in Mexico, and how it sometimes sets off the explosive detectors because they can't figure out like what the aroma is that they're picking up. I thought that was kind of a funny story. I just want to check and see if anybody has any questions yet. Another traditional accompaniment for mole is rice. It's really nice to have a nice dish of rice because it just soaks up the sauce, and it's really tasty, the mole on the rice. I've been known to just have mole and rice without having any kind of meat or protein with it because it's just that tasty. You can see this is splattering all over the place. My mother used to talk about mole being a dish that was kind of an elegant dish, and people would say if you had mole stains on your clothes that you were bragging. They called it like a tablecloth stainer because it's a dark brown color. I mean, honestly, it's not the most attractive looking dish, but I think once people taste it and know what it is that they're dealing with, the sight of it is not so unappetizing. I'm going to need to continue to add more chicken stock in here. As you can see, I'm adding it little bit by little bit until the paste is going to break down and get mixed easily into the sauce. And that's the point that I'm going to add a little bit of peanut butter and a little bit of chocolate just to season it up a little bit more. One of the other things that I think is a must-have when you're having mole is to have good tortillas. And when I say tortillas, I'm typically referring to corn tortillas. Again, corn was another ingredient that was indigenous to Mexico and Central America. And the corn tortillas are just made out of a paste of tortillas that are seasoned with lime to soften the corn that's treated with lime to soften it. And they're ground and a little bit of water and salt is added to it, and they're pressed out into the flat tortilla. If it's done by hand, there's a tortilla press that they're flattened with. If it's not done by hand, the dough, the masa, is put into a machine and put on a conveyor belt. It almost looks like the conveyor belts that they use like at Burger King to flame broil the burgers. The taste of a corn tortilla, in my opinion, is far superior to a flour tortilla, and they're a perfect accompaniment for having your mole. My sauce is getting to where I want it to be. I keep on adding more chicken stock little by little. I'm probably adding it in increments of about 1/3 to 1/2 of a cup because I know what the consistency is that I want this to be, and I'm getting there. You know, and I was talking about trying to describe the consistency before. I'm looking at this now, and I think a better consistency would be if you've ever melted chocolate. That's about what the consistency is. So like if you've melted chocolate chips or melted any other kind of chocolate and mixed it around, that's pretty much the consistency that you're looking for. This is still a little bit thick, so I'm going to add a little bit more chicken stock in here. So let me hold this up quickly so you can see what the consistency looks like. So that dry paste has melded quite nicely. So now I'm just pretty much mixing it to have it be smooth. I'm going to add in my lump of chocolate here, which, since this is pretty hot now, should melt into the sauce pretty quickly. And I'm also going to add a dollop, maybe about a tablespoon of peanut butter. And just kind of mix those into the sauce, and then I'm going to taste it to see if I like the way that it tastes. One of the things with these peppers is that the spiciness of the peppers is unpredictable. They can be very mild to very spicy, and it's just a function of the actual peppers. There's no control over it. For me, I don't really care for foods that are really spicy, and I find that adding the chocolate and the peanut butter cuts the spice level a little bit. Sometimes some people may cut the mole paste with tomato or tomato sauce, which also lightens it up and makes it a little bit less spicy. Just takes some of the heat out. I do intend to have a session on tamales when it's a little bit cooler outside. That will be a longer session. I'll probably do that via a Zoom call. A lot of people are interested in how to make tamales, but that's definitely something that can't be done in a 15 or 20 minute live session, and it requires a lot of advanced preparation. But if that's something that you'd be interested in doing, let me know. I'm thinking maybe in October I'll spend some time on a weekend afternoon making tamales for anybody who wants to dial in and cook along with me. That would actually be a really fun thing to do. Get this just a little bit less thick. I think we're almost there. And I'm going to go ahead and taste it and see if I want to add any more chocolate or peanut butter. I think it's actually pretty good, exactly how it is. So I'm going to take this off the heat now. And I actually have over here some rice that I prepared earlier. So I'm going to dish this up so you can see what the finished dish looks like. So I have some rice and a little chicken thigh that was cooked already that I've heated up. And I'm just going to portion the sauce over the chicken and a little bit over the rice as well. That was a little messy there. It's all about appearances and presentation, right? Move this out of the way. And I have some tortillas that I warmed up before. So I'm going to take one of my tortillas here and roll it up. You take the tortilla that's warm and you put it in the flat of your hand and kind of bend it over and just roll it up like that. And so now I have a nice tortilla to dip in my mole sauce and eat along with my chicken and mole. Delicious. I hope you enjoyed today's session from Joan's Kitchen, and I do hope that you realize how quickly I pulled that together. If you had a rotisserie chicken, that could be the chicken that you used for this, or you could just poach some chicken breasts to have as your chicken for this. And it's a very easy, very tasty dish to pull together quite quickly. And it's really a traditional Mexican dish. These sauces, these concentrates that I showed you, are made in Mexico. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, if not, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today, and I will see you again next Monday from Joan's Kitchen. Have a great week, everybody. Ciao for now.